All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsor for the month of Nisan, Saeed Sima Haken, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month to show their Hakarat Hatov to Hashem, for all of his Nisim and Niflaot. May Hakadosh Baruch Hu redeem all of the hostages and bring complete Hatzlacha to Eretz Yisrael and to Yisrael. The week of learning sponsors the Rom and Bravo families, nishmas, their father Mordechai ben Yischak. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, his neshama will have an aliya and the family a neshama. And our day of learning sponsors Seth and Rachel Rotenberg, in honor of Barry and Judy Nabozny, for being such wonderful friends and all around terrific people. And a beautiful dedication. All right, now let's say with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Mem Tes 49, and we are picking up Emir Hashem on Mem Chesam with Beis. We have a lot to do today, 48b, and we left off pretty much like point in the middle of the page. Itmar a Ravo. Actually, we began this yesterday, but let's back up to over here because this is an incredibly important sugya. So we'll say, so remember again, we began to touch on this a little bit, which is what is the status of a down payment. Right? You go ahead and you provide a down payment in a transaction. So what is the impact and what is the status of that down payment? Itmar a Rav. So he put down a down payment. Rav Omer Kenegdahu Kona. So Rav says, when you put down a down payment, what you do is you acquire a corresponding amount of merchandise. So again, I'm purchasing $1,000 of wheat. I put down $100. I have acquired a corresponding amount of $100 of wheat. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows. Good. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan says, so actually if you take a look at Rashi says over here, Hu savar kinegdahu kone. Rashi says a little bit further up in the short lines in Rashi. So Rashi says, "Im mechiras karko hu sheniknes bekesef kone kinyan gamer. Im mechiras matalklin hu kone kinegdal ischay b'mishapara." So we'll say it's interesting. What we're going to have to see in this discussion is that there may be a distinction between a real property transaction versus a movable property transaction. That it could very well be that in a real property transaction, everyone agrees that a down payment has the ability to affect the totality of the acquisition. Metaltal and movable property, however, could be where Rav is saying that halacha l'maisa, you acquire a corresponding amount of movable property. Okay, that's Rav. Rabbi Yochanan says, Keneget kula hukona. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you acquire everything. You acquire everything. Rashi, Rabbi Yochanan, bekarka lekinyan gamer, ubimetaltalin kabal mishapara. So we'll say, Rabbi Yochanan says that halacha l'maisa, again, for karka, so we'll say, sounds like that for land, for real property, everyone is agreeing that a down payment has the ability to affect the totality of the transaction. The shaila is in metaltalin, what happens? So Rabbi Yochanan makes it sound like that you acquire a corresponding amount of produce. And Rav says you go ahead and you acquire a corresponding amount of produce, and Rabbi Yochanan ultimately sounds like you really acquire the entire thing. So Metzia, let's analyze this. Hanosin a Rav l'chaveirav, a person gives a down payment to his friend. Omer lo, and again, so let's say buyer says to seller, Imani choser bi, if I retract on this transaction, if I decide to back out, so ultimately again, so irvuni macholoch, I hereby forgive my down payment to you. Not only that, right? V'halo omer, and let's say again, the seller says, Imani achzer bi, if I go ahead and I cancel on this transaction, I will I'll give you back double your down payment. So what's the halacha? So again, each are obviously trying to assure the other that they're not backing out, right? So buyer says, if I back out, you could keep my down payment. Seller says, if I back out, I'll double your down payment, and obviously I'll give it back to you. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, this kind of Hatzanon div Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says that ultimately the halacha l'maisa, these conditions are upheld. That indeed, if one of them backs out, so they are bound by the promise that they made to the other. So the Gemara Rabbi Yossi, the time Rabbi Yossi is going to his reasoning. Why the Amar asmachta kanya? But we've seen this in passing before. It's a really incredible idea. Asmachta means what happens when a person makes a hyperbolic promise. Right, hyperbolic promise. So is that binding or not? So mostly this actually has a number of different ramifications everything from a situation like this where clearly, right, both the buyer and the seller are engaging in what appears to be some exaggerated promises in order to give the other a sense of security in the transaction. So the shaila is, do they really ever have in mind to actually honor it or not? And therefore, again, by extension, is this considered to be something that is binding? So Rabbi Yossi holds that the halacha is yes, asmach tekanya, even a hyperbolic promise ultimately is binding. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, dayo shen yikne kneged ervuno. So Rabbi Yehuda said it should be enough that Allah Lamaisa, the buyer should acquire corresponding to his down payment. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, "V'dayu sheyikne lo ze yachmo v'lo ze yichpol ela lo ze v'lo ze yicholin lachzor milekaymis hamechira kineged hayravon v'chosmas hashar." So Yossi says, "Look. No one's going to have to forgive, and no one's going to get to keep the down payment." And no one's going to have to double the down payments. Rather, what happens in a case like this where someone to back out? The only thing that buyer and seller are on the hook for is the amount of merchandise corresponding to the amount of the down payment. So we'll say, so once again, you see this tension. Does the down payment, in fact, go ahead and affect a complete transaction, or does it just acquire the merchandise corresponding to that limited amount? When is this so? Bisman she'omer lo ervuni yikun. So we'll say, so this is where is all of this said? Now again, where's what said? So Rashi points out over here that a down payment goes ahead and acquires a corresponding amount of merchandise. When is that so? When the purchaser says, I want my down payment to acquire. Ervoni yikun means I want my down payment to buy. Look at Rashi. Bisman shomer lo ervoni yikon yikne shelo nasnu lo b'toras tchilas piron b'ashar alav milva ela b'toras she'iravon ze yikne es hakol v'halav milsi. So it's actually going to be a very nuanced point. Everything depends, the Gemara says, on how you go ahead and you give the down payment. If the down payment is given as the purchase price, right, that doesn't work. There's no such thing like that. And therefore, again, all you do is acquire an amount corresponding to the down payment. That's going to be different than saying that a down payment is the beginning of the purchase price, right? And the rest of the purchase price is a loan upon the purchaser. And therefore, we'll say, in that case, the down payment could actually work to affect the totality of the sale. So when you have in mind that ultimately, again, the down payment should be the purchase price, then you're only going to acquire a corresponding amount of merchandise. Aval, machalo bayis osad, back to the Gemara. Excuse me. Thank you. Aval, machalo bayis osad be'elev zuz. Listen to this. If I buy a home or a field for 1,000 zuz, uparlo mehem 500 zuz, and I pay off 500 zuz, kana, so let's say I acquire the land. Even though what? Now I acquire what part of the land? What part of the land? All of it. Right? Even though what? Even though I've only given a down payment of half. Umaksula sashar, and obviously I have to pay back the remainder. Afilu la'achar kama shanim. And this is a debt. This is a debt that I owe that is payable over no matter how many years it takes. So the Gemara says, "My love, who adil metaltalin," right? So ultimately, again, doesn't this? So the Gemara suggests, wouldn't this same halacha also apply to metaltalin? Bedistama kani lo lekulu. That halacha, when you give a down payment, so the down payment should affect the totality of the transaction, should acquire everything metaltalin. To which the Gemara says, no. B'metaltalin b'distama lo kani. We'll say that is not true. In general, when it comes to a down payment on move, see, here's what's interesting. And then we'll say, already Rashi alluded to this earlier. When it comes to real property, we're going to see, everyone agrees that a down payment has the ability to affect the totality of the transaction. Right? There's no idea that if I buy a piece of land from Ruvain for $100,000 and I give Ruvain $10,000 as a down payment, no one is suggesting that I only have acquired $10,000 worth of land. It's understood that the $10,000 payment acquires the totality of the land for me. So the Gemara says, okay, so shouldn't the same thing apply to metaltalin, to movable property? To which the Gemara says, no. To which the Gemara says, Maishna karka. So I don't understand. So why is real property different than movable property? Very simple. Maishna karka, dibekaspa kanile mamish, kanile lekula. So we'll say, here's the difference. Karka, kesef, is one of the ways that you acquire real property. In fact, I will say, remember again, opening Mishnah in Maseches Kiddushin, Isha Niknis Begimel Drachim, right? The woman is acquired in three different ways: Bekesev, Shtar, and Bia. So marriage is affected in three different ways. So let's remember again, where is Kesef learned from? Marasa Machpelah. Kicha Mistei Ephron. So money, the first time that the Torah teaches us about a kinyan by real property is by money. Well, the truth is also chazaka, right? Because Hakadosh Baruch Hu tells Avram Avinu, right, to go ahead and walk the length of the breadth of the land. But again, the first time we see like active kinyan is going to be by money. So when it comes to money, when it comes to karka, see, everyone agrees that a partial payment of karka. Everyone agrees. Let me work backwards. Everyone agrees that a down payment goes ahead and affects full acquisition of the land. Why? Because money is one of the primary ways to acquire karka. So therefore it makes sense that a down payment has the ability to go ahead and affect the totality of the transaction. Metaltali de lo kani, ela lekabule mishepara, lo kani lekule. Here it is, Rabbi. Right? Our whole sugya is talking about that what? You can't acquire metaltalin with money. Now again, I will say, why can't you do that? So remember again, that's our machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish on Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Right? So again, remember, Rabbi Yochanan says midaraisa, money can acquire, but the Rabbanan stepped in and said no, that it didn't. And Reish Lakish says midaraisa, money doesn't acquire, Mashiach acquires. See, either way, bottom line for our purposes, you can't acquire metaltalin with money. So because you can't acquire metaltalin with money, it doesn't make sense to say that a down payment would affect the totality of the transaction when it comes to metaltalin. That's the Gemara's logic. So the Gemara says, metaltalin. Metaltalin lo kani ela kabulim mishepara. So it says, remember again, what does money do by metaltalin? What money does do is it commits you to a transaction. It doesn't affect the transaction, but it commits you to it. So if after paying money for a metaltalin transaction, you back out, what do you get? A mishapara. You get the curse. Now, by the way, I just want to point out that is still an open-ended piece over here. We never fully kind of close that out in terms of how mishapara works. Right? First of all, are you getting cursed, or is it just somebody actually cursing you? Right? Or is it just like, I don't know, like in the shul bulletin, mishaberachs and mishaparas, right? In other words, who's being listed? Right? Is that so? We don't know that, and also again, remember, we also don't know exactly when you're getting a mishapara. Is a verbal commitment enough, or is a verbal commitment the money? So I have the Rambam ready. Hopefully, we'll get to it today. So the Gemara goes weiter. So the truth is, so I just want to point out, the nice part about this discussion now is, what we can effectively remove from the discussion is karka. Because everyone is agreeing that down payment on karka has the ability to affect the totality of the transaction. And now I also understand why. It's logical. Because money is one of the ways that you acquire real property. So let's remove karka, and let's understand that what we're really talking about over here is metaltalin. What is the power of a down payment in a metaltalin transaction? So the Gemara goes right there. So the Gemara says, so let's say this whole thing is about here we go. So we'll say, if I lend Ruvain money, right, and Ruvain gives me collateral, and now the Shemitah year comes, so we'll say, when Shemitah comes, now normally Shemitah cancels debts, but because I am holding a piece of collateral, therefore it's as if what? It's as if the debt is collected. Now we're saying, and therefore Shemitah doesn't cancel it, which is logical. But what's the chiddush over here? What's the chiddush? Even though the collateral is, let's say I lent Ruben $1,000, the collateral is only worth $500. Even though collateral is only worth $500, halacha l'maisa, Shemitah doesn't cancel the debt, and I have the ability to collect it after Shemitah. So the Gemara says, fine. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Omer, if I am mashkon connected hava also in a meshamet, film not meshamet. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says no. He says everything depends on the value of the collateral. If the collateral is worth the entire debt, then ultimately Shemitah won't cancel it. But if not, Shemitah will cancel it. Says, well, let's analyze this. My Eino Meshamet to come Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So let's go to Shimon Gamliel first, right? I lend Reuven $1,000. Reuven gives me a piece of collateral that's worth 500. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Shemitah doesn't cancel. Shemitah doesn't cancel. Smart says, what does that mean? So maybe Rabbi Shimon means like this. Maybe Rabbi Shimon says that Shemitah doesn't cancel. What does he mean? Shemitah doesn't cancel the part of the debt that corresponds to the value of the collateral. But Shemitah does cancel the rest. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, then according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, according to him, he would have to say that Shemitah cancels everything, even the part of the debt that corresponds to the value of the collateral. Top of Memtes 49a, Elamashkon denakit lamalei. But I will say, if Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi would actually say that Shemitah cancels the part of the debt that even corresponds to the value of the mashkon, then what's the purpose of the collateral? Elalav shmamine ena mashamit. The Kamar of Shimon Gamliel ena mashamit bekulo. Rather, what you have to say is like this. When Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that if I have collateral, Shemitah doesn't cancel the debt, what does that mean? It means Shemitah doesn't cancel the entire debt. Right? Even though, again, I only have collateral worth $500 and the debt is for $1,000, it doesn't matter. Shemitah doesn't cancel the entire debt. The entire debt remains intact or is viewed as collected. Beautiful. Umay meshamit chum Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And we'll say, what does Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi mean? Wait, when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says that if I lend Reuven $1,000, I have collateral for $500, right? $500. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says that Shemitah is meshamit. Shemitah cancels. What does Shemitah cancel? Lahach palga to lo naket alei mashkon. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi will say that Shemitah will cancel the part of the debt that's, so to speak, unsecured, meaning $500. So Rabbi will say, so here's the machlokes, and this is really fascinating. So let's do this again. I lend Reuven $1,000, right? In year number 6 of the agricultural cycle, I lend Reuven $1,000. Reuven gives me a piece of collateral that is worth $500. Shemitah comes. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Shemitah does not cancel the debt because the collateral, even though it's worth only half of the loan, secures the entire loan. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, no, what the collateral will do is secure the part of the loan that it's valued against. So it'll secure $500 worth of the loan, but Shemitah will cancel the remaining $500. That's the machlokes. Very interesting. The Gemara says, what are they arguing about? This is incredible. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Savar. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Savar, Kineged kulo hukona. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Savar, Kinegdo hukona. So I will say, the truth is, what they're really arguing about is the nature of collateral, which within Gemara's mind is the same thing as the nature of a down payment. Right? So we'll say, so what is the power of a down payment / collateral? So essentially, so Rabbi Shimon will say, the power of a down payment / collateral is it affects the totality of the transaction. We don't look as much as the value of the down payment or the value of the collateral. As fact is, these are the mechanisms that allow the transaction to occur, and therefore they're viewed halachically almost as having the full value of the transaction. Therefore, again, when you lend money and it is secured by collateral, and ultimately, again, the collateral is only worth half of the debt, it's viewed as if the entire debt is secure, and therefore Shemitah won't cancel it. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi will say no. So again, down payment. What does it? We'll say, what does a down payment get you? Down payment gets you a corresponding amount of merchandise. That's all that it gets you. That's all that it gets you. Same way that collateral will only secure the amount of debt that it is valued against. So if you have $500 of collateral, that'll secure $500 of debt, and that will prevent Shemitah from canceling that corresponding amount of the loan. That's the Gemara's suggestion. To which the Gemara says, lo. My Eina Meshamit Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. No, maybe not, or maybe not. When Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that Shemitah doesn't cancel, what does it mean Shemitah doesn't cancel? Lahach palga denaket alei mashkon. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying like this: when you have collateral that is worth $500, so Shemitah won't cancel $500 worth of the debt. That's what it won't cancel. As the Gemara says, Nami Mishamit. So both say if that's the case, then you'd have to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he actually says that Shemitah will what? Cancel everything. Cancel everything. Right? That in other words, so we'll say essentially, according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the only way Shemitah won't cancel your debt is if you have collateral that corresponds to the entire value of the debt. But if you don't have that, then Shemitah is going to go ahead and cancel your debt, even corresponding to the $500 of collateral that you do possess. If that's the case, the Gemara says, Ela mashkon dinakit lamale. So Rabbi say in Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's view, then what does mashkon do? As Rabbi say, what does collateral do if it doesn't even secure the corresponding amount of debt? To which the Gemara says, L'zichron dvarim ba'alma. I will say, what does mashkon do? This is incredible. Mashkon, it's a reminder. In other words, that should the borrower, right, ever try to say, I don't owe you anything. So the lender has a mashkon, and the mashkon is physical proof that a loan did indeed take place, and that Reuben owes me money. Incredible. So I will say, So we are really in the midst of this dramatic machlokes, which you could see over here has multiple applications. So of course, on the most basic level, I'm purchasing metaltalin, right? I'm purchasing movable property. I put down a down payment. What is the impact of that down payment? Does that down payment give me full title to all of the metaltalin being purchased, or no? It only gives me a corresponding amount of ownership, right? Or ownership over a corresponding amount of metaltalin. So that's our machlokes. Now what we've seen about say is this spreads. What does this spread to? What does it spread to? Collateral. When you have collateral for a loan, but the collateral does not go ahead and reflect the entire value of the loan, so specifically for Shemitah, is that considered to be a secured loan or not? So I will say there's a machlokes. Rabbi Shmuel says, yes, partial collateral is secured loan. Rabbi Nasi says, no, it's not. So we see the tentacles of this machlok is spreading. What's the one part of, right, the one piece, the one good thing, not the one, many good things, but what's the one kind of thing that we've settled on? That by by karka, by real property, everyone agrees that when you put down a down payment, right, a deposit, that Allah said that affects the totality of the transaction. But again, that's because money affects normal acquisition of real property. Good. We're not finished yet. Here we go. Rav Kahana. We'll say great story here. A couple of great stories. Rav Kahana. Yavule Zuzi Akisna. So let's listen to this. So Rav Kahana was selling linen. He was a linen salesman. So what happened? Somebody, or somebody was just buying linen from him. Either way, he was buying linen, right? He was selling linen, right? So someone came over to him, gave him money for linen. Sof Iyakar Kisna. So we'll say what happened. So what ended up happening over here is we'll call him Ruvain, right? Ruvain came over to Rav Kahana. Ruvain gave Rav Kahana $100 for linen. Okay, fine. Now, Rav Kahana did not deliver the product yet. What happened? After Rav Kahana received the money, so you know where this is going, right? Linen went up in price. Linen appreciated. So what happened? So Rav Kahana went to Rav, Amralei, B'mai dinekitas zuze hav lahu, v'idach dvarim ninhu, v'dvarim ein bahem mishum mechusari amana. Both say second wide line. So watch this. So obviously, now, Rav Kahana goes to Rav. So we'll say, what does Rav Kahana want to do? What does Rav Kahana want to do? What does he want to do? Right? So he wants to follow the halacha. That's what he wants, right? He doesn't know what the halacha is, so he goes to Rav, and Rav says, listen, the truth is the only thing you're on the hook for is the amount of linen corresponding to the down payment. That's it. That's what you are obligated to honor that. And I will say, even that, why are you obligated to honor that? Right? Mishapara, Michusari Amana, right? Because it's not nice to stand behind your word. Remember, again, you've already seen that giving money for metaltalin does not go ahead and lock in the transaction. What it says is, just for honesty and integrity, you have to go ahead. But you only have to honor the amount of linen corresponding to the money. The rest of the transaction, you have the right to back out of, right? Why? Because ultimately it's dvarim. It's only words. And backing out of a verbal commitment, right, does not go ahead and erode your integrity. All right, now there's a lot of interesting stuff going on over here. Right, so let's see it play out. The Gemara says, the itmar, because we've learned before, dvarim. I will say it's incredible. Dvarim. Now I will say, what's dvarim? Dvarim is a verbal commitment. Rav Amra ein ba mishum mechusar amana. Rav says backing out of a verbal commitment does not erode your integrity. Rabbi Yochanan Amar yesh ba mishum mechusar amana. Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, it does. Yes, it does. If you make a verbal commitment to something, a verbal commitment to a business transaction, and then you go out and you back out of it, that absolutely erodes your integrity. So let's analyze this. We'll say. So Meisvei, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Omer, Ma Talmud Lomer Hin Sedek Valo Hin Bichlal Efa. So we'll say, so just to give you a bit of context over here, the Torah over here is speaking about keeping proper weights and measures. So the Torah says, Me'oznei tzedek, avnei tzedek, ifas tzedek, v'hin tzedek. So you should make sure to have proper scales. You should make sure to have proper weights, to have proper measures. Now, both say, when the Torah speaks about proper measures, it says, ifas tzedek, v'hin tzedek. Now, ifa and hin are both measures. Right? Ephah is a larger measure, hin is a smaller measure. So there are whatever number of hins in an ephah. So the obvious shaila is, if you're already saying ephah, why do you have to say hin? You don't need both. You don't need both. I got the point. You should have appropriate measures. So the Gemara says, Mat hamul hin tzedek, valo hin bichlal ephah haya. Right? The hin is included in an ephah. We'll say it's such a beautiful Gemara. Ela lomar lecha, sheyehei hin shel tzedek, v'lav shel tzedek. Rather, we'll say, what does it mean? It means your yeses should be righteous, and your no's should be righteous. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Elishei hein shalcha kilomar kisha'ata medaber hein olav kayim dvarecha v'hatzte gosam. Whatever you say, stand by it. Whatever you say, stand by it. So you give a yes to a transaction, stand by it. You give a no to a transaction. And by the way, I just want to point out, this is not just transactional law. The Gemara is teaching us a general lesson of, right, my word is my bond. I will say now, I want to be clear on something. The Gemara is not suggesting that a person can't change their mind. Of course, in other words, we say things in life, and then things change, we change. Of course you could change your mind. So I'll say, but even if a person is going to change their mind, the change of mind or a change of heart or a change of position should be something that's thought out, based on a principled pivot. But again, just to go ahead and say things and then not to honor them, so the Gemara says, that's wrong. That's wrong. You're hin tzedek, right? You're ultimately, again, your yeses, right? Your hein and your lav. Your yeses and your no's should be upright and just. Stand by your word. Amar Abaye, hahu shelo yidaber echad bepeh ve'echad belev. Abaye says what it means is, you shouldn't say one thing with your mouth and believe something different with your heart. Rashi says over here, shelo yidaber echad bepeh b'shashu omer hadibor lo yehi bedaito l'shanos. So it's actually very interesting. So Abaye says, don't say something knowing in your heart that you're not going to execute on that, or that you're going to change your mind. He says, "Aval nishtana hashar la'achar zman v'uchozer bo lefi shinui hashar ein kan chisar namana." So I just want to point out something amazing. There's a machlokes over here between Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda and Abaye. See, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says like this: if you make a commitment, honor it. And even if things change, you still have to honor it. Abaye says what it means is like this. What does it mean, hin tzedek, that your yeses and your no's should be righteous and upright? So Abaye says, you should never be disingenuous. Right? Rabbi Yosef Yehuda is saying, you have to stand by your word. Abaye says you can't be disingenuous. I will say, what's the nafka? What's the practical difference in these two approaches? So watch this. The practical difference will be in our case. What happens, I will say, in a case like Rav Kahana, where Rav Kahana committed to sell linen, and then what happened? The price went up. So he got a down payment, the price went up. So this is fasting. So is he allowed to back out of the transaction? So this is fasting. So according to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, the answer is no. The answer is no. You made a commitment, you have to honor your commitment. According to Abaye, what does honesty mean? Honesty means that when you make a commitment, honor it and don't have in your heart that you're going to do something different. But according to Abaye, if circumstances change, then you are allowed to pivot. In other words, that's not being disingenuous, that's the world changing. So for example, in this case over here, where the silk went up, Rav Kahana has every right to go ahead and say, you know what, of course I'll honor the transaction corresponding to the amount of money you gave me, but I'm not bound by the rest of it. I'll say, isn't that fascinating? So again, here, everything based on this one phrase, hin tzedek. Your yeses and your no's should be honest. So again, Rav Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda saying, stand by your word. Whatever commitment you made, honor it. Abaye says, no, that's not what it means, because sometimes in life, we make promises and then things change. And why should I be bound to a promise that was tethered to circumstances that no longer apply? Therefore, Abaye says, what it really means is, don't be disingenuous. So don't say one thing with your mouth and know that with your heart, ultimately, again, you're in your heart, you're really not going to execute on the verbal commitment that you're making. So I will say, this idea also, the Svarim bring down that this idea of shelo yidaber echad bepeh ve'echad belev, they say is a remez to making sure that a person doesn't daven without kavana. They say davening without kavana is being echad bepeh ve'echad b'leiv. Right? My mouth is saying all these words. My mouth is saying all these words, but in my heart, I'm not feeling anything. So the goal ultimately, again, for tefillah is that it should be echad bepeh, right? In other words, echad bepeh u'b'leiv. That ultimately, again, the mouth should reflect that which is in the heart, and the heart ultimately, again, should generate the kedusha through which the peh is able to articulate the words. Okay, meisvei. So I'll say some Gemara is a kasha. Now I'll say, I just want to point out, okay, so now we've opened up like another front over here, because remember, we're still in our primary discussion, which is, what's the power of a down payment? Right? What does a down payment do by metaltalin? Now I'll say what we've also opened up is, so what is the scope of being disingenuous? In other words, I'll say, this is a very important halacha, which is, when you make a verbal commitment, so to what degree am I obligated to honor that? In other words, I will say, obviously, you make a commitment, nothing changes, honor it. But where does this become complicated? It says, Maisim b'chol yom, Maisim b'chol yom. Forget about it, doesn't even apply with money, right? I make a commitment to do something for someone, and then some other circumstances change. They just change. So to what degree am I obligated to make sure that I execute on that which I promised to do? Here we go. So Gemara says like this. Meisi Gemara is a kasha. B'shimon Omer af apisha amru talis kona dinar zav ve'in dinar zav kona talis. So let's remember again, going back to our Mishnah. B'shimon says, this is what we were introduced to. Even though we said a talis, which is the merchandise, acquires the dinar zav, acquires the coin, right? But the coin does not acquire the talis, which I will say again. This is Hazav 101, which is money. Money cannot be the vehicle through which to affect chalipin. Aval Amru, but Chazal said, Misha para me anshe dor hamabul, or me anshe dor haflaga, who asid li para me misha ina omid b'diburo. Yet I will say we learned that what? We learned that Allah Lamaisa, someone who pays money, so even though again putting down the money, which essentially is putting down the down payment, doesn't affect the transaction, but you're also not allowed to back out of it. And if you do, you're subject to the Misha para curse. So I will say, so what do you see from here? What do you see from here? You see from here that Allah Lamaisa, when you go ahead and you make a commitment to a transaction, backing out of it is wrong. Backing out of it is wrong. So what's going on over here? So says tonight, it's machlokes tonight. Here we go. Both say great story. Great story. This nan. Ma'is Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia. Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia. Shamar Lebno said to his son, say v'sachar lana palim. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia said to his son, go out and hire workers. Go out and get workers for us. So what happened? So the son went out to the workers, and he said, okay, you'll come to work for us, and part of your job, or part of your wages, or maybe sometimes, we'll say there were different labor arrangements. Sometimes you paid your workers in money, and sometimes you just gave them food. So the son said, come to work for us, and halach l'maisa will give you food. Right, we'll give you mizonos. So Kishaba Yisrael Aviv. So then when the son came back to his father, Amar lo b'ni, afilu ata osam kisuda shlomo b'shaito lo yotzi yedei chovas chayman. So essentially, Rabbi says incredible. So Rabbi Yochanan says to his son, what did you do? What did you do? You agreed to go ahead and give them mizonos, but you didn't qualify what you're giving them. And therefore, again, even if you go ahead and you mamish make them like Sudas Shlomo HaMelech, right? You make them a monarchical feast. You will not satisfy your obligation towards them. Why? This is incredible. It's so beautiful. Shehin b'nei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yakov. Because you know who you're talking to. You're talking to the sons of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They are malachim. They're royalty. They deserve everything. So the problem that Rabbi Yochanan was telling his son is, you made a commitment that is very dramatic. So what do you need to do? Ella, rather, my son, here's what you need to do. Before they start working, so run back outside. And before they begin to work, tell them, by the way, guys, a little bit of a revision in the contract, right? Food means bread and lentils. Bread and lentils. Right? So we'll say, so that's ultimately again what it means. We'll say, it's just such a beautiful Gemara. I just want to point out, these were the laborers. These are the laborers. So we'll say, so again, I don't know who these are the day laborers, the guy that you could. And yet, we'll say, Yisir Rabbi Yochanan speaks about, again, just even the simplest of Jews. It's so important to always remember that even the simplest amongst us, right, the most unlearned amongst us, are the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, are Malachim. our royalty, and how careful we have to be in the way that we treat one another, knowing that each of us is of royal lineage, knowing that each of us is a child of the patriarchs, how careful we have to be with the way we treat one another. Such a beautiful Gemara. If you go with the idea that verbal commitment, that you can't even retract on a verbal commitment, because if you do so, it erodes your integrity. So I'll say, so how could Rabbi Yochanan have told his son, after making the verbal commitment, how could Rabbi Yochanan have told his son that what? Go back and renegotiate with them. To which the Gemara says, no, shani hasam. It's okay, because in this case, even the workers themselves knew that it was probably going to be qualified what they were getting for their meals. Why? My timer made the yadi da'alavua samach. Because also at the end of the day, they recognized that it wasn't Rabbi Yochanan the father who hired them, but rather again it was who? The son. So the son hired them, and they were going to be working for Rabbi Yochanan the father. So they understood that the son was there to engage them. But the parameters of the employment agreement were probably going to be defined later on. So therefore it was fine. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan was never locked in to providing any quality of a meal beforehand. So now he just outlined what the parameters were. If that's the case, then why did Rabbi Yochanan say to his son, quick, go out and find them before they start the work? Even if they started the work already, you should be able to go ahead and redefine the parameters. No. To which the Gemara says, no, and this makes sense. We'll say, once they started the work already, in other words, when one of the workers understand that the parameters of the employment agreement could be reshaped and redefined, that's before they get to work. Once they start to work already, they assume that whatever the son committed to, the father's already bought into. Okay, incredible. Rabbi Yochanan says, listen to this, I say to Ruvain, Matana ani nosein lecha. I say to Ruvain, I'm giving you a gift. What's the halacha? Yachol lachzer bo. I could renege. Now, this is obviously before I gave him the gift, right? I make a verbal commitment, Ruvain, I'm giving you a gift. I have the ability to renege. The Gemara says, Yachol? Of course, Yachol pshita. Of course you can. I didn't give him anything. Of course you can. Ella mutter lachzer bo. Rather, Rabbi say, what's the chiddush over here? The chiddush over here is that halacha l'maisa, I am allowed to do so. Rabbi say, now what does that show you? That retracting on your verbal commitment does not erode your personalistic integrity. So you're allowed to even retract the gift. So that's the Rabbi say. Now here's what's interesting. What's the logic of that? The logic of that, Rabbi say, is if I go over to Ruvain and I say to Ruvain, I'm giving you a gift. Rabbi say, when somebody comes over to you and says, I'm giving you a gift, what's generally your mindset? Right? Why? It's right. What do you want? Right? What do you want? I'll say, so often the Gemara says the mindset is, okay, that's nice. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. Again, I'm not taking that to the bank. In other words, that's fine. There's no smichas das. Somebody offers you anything free. Generally, it's like, okay, very nice. We'll see it. We'll see it when it happens. So because there's no smichas das, so therefore, again, the halacha is the giver could just pull it back. So here's what's interesting. Papa will agree, however, in a matana mu'atas. If you promise someone something small, in that case, a person does have smichas das, right? In that case, a person says, okay, it's small, maybe relatively insignificant, so I believe that the giver is going to carry through on that. So in that case, a retraction of that would be problematic. How can I mistabra? Dam Rabbi Avo, Am Rabbi Yochanan. Yisrael Shamar Leben Levi. Listen to this. A Yisrael says to a Levi. So Kor Meister Yish will say. It's interesting, by the way, when the Gemara often phrases it like this, that Yisrael says it to a Ben Levi. Why not just say what? Yisrael says it to. It doesn't call me a Ben Yisrael. I just call it a Ben. I just call it a Levi. I'll say it's so interesting and so important, especially for the Kohen and Levim, to remember, right, who you descend from. That your kedusha is not yours. Right? Your kedusha is the kedusha of your forefathers, and that does two things. Number one, I will say, it says that you have a ridiculously overwhelming mantle to go ahead and carry and perpetuate. It also says, calm down, don't get carried away with yourself. Right? You didn't do anything to earn that. right? You did nothing to earn that. Shkayach, you were born to a father who's a Levi. You are born to a father who's a Kohen. Good for you, right? That's absolutely no reflection on your personalistic level of accomplishment, which means, let's say, don't go through life thinking that, I'm accomplished because look at me, I'm a Kohen. I'm accomplished, look at me as a Levi. No, that doesn't make you accomplished. That makes you entitled. Doesn't make you accomplished. Accomplishments in life are the things that you accomplish on your own. Not standing on the shoulders of others, right? Not going ahead and basking in the glow of others. Your accomplishments in life are the things you do for yourself, and for others, by yourself. So Ben Levi, beautiful. Of course, you should bask in the glow of your forefathers, but do not content yourself with that, with your genealogical hierarchy being your great accomplishment in life. Incredible. All from one word, I was saying. All from one word. Just calls him a Ben Levi instead of a Levi. Incredible. So we'll say, so watch this. So Yisrael Shalom the Ben Levi. So Yisrael says to the son of a Levi, Ben Levi, a Levi, Kor Maisi Yesh Chabiyadi. I have a core of Meiser for you. In other words, so we'll say, this is going to be a case which Shemir Hashem is going to happen in the base of Mikdash very soon. Here, Rabbi Yameinu. I have some friends who are Leviim. A number of them, Baruch Hashem, are here, right? So I go over to say, you know what? I've got some meiser for you, right? Some meiser rishon for you. I bump into the lady in the street. Feel good? You know what? I'm gonna give you my meiser rishon. Okay, so I'll say, so what happens? Levi hears this, and what does he do? Roshay lasos trumas meiser makom acher. I remember again, a Levi has to separate out trumas meiser, right? A Levi has to separate out a portion from his portion for the Kohen. So the Levi, my good friend Levi, says, great. Silber said, just give me his meiser rishon. So you know what I'm going to do? I hereby designate the meiser rishon that is in Silber's house that he's going to give me as trumas meiser on produce that I have in my granary. Right? A lot of steps over here. The point over here, I will say, is what has the Levi done? The Levi has taken my verbal commitment and he's taken it to the bank. Right? He says, Silber promised me his meiser rishon. So therefore, I'm already designating it as trumas meiser. So we'll say, all right, a trumas meiser amokum acher. So we'll say it works. Say if you say that once you make a verbal commitment, you can't back out of it. So then I will say it makes sense that the designation works because halacha l'maisa, I can't back out. But if I do have the ability to back out of a verbal commitment, then I don't understand how could the Levi start designating this as trumas meiser for somewhere else. What's the case over here? Okay, this is interesting. So we'll say, what's the case over here? The case over here is where I gave my Levi friend the meiser rishon, and then Levi gave it back to me to watch for him. Okay, to which the Gemara says, if that's the case, it really belongs to him. I'll say, here's the problem. The sefer of that price says, if I change my mind, and now I give that meiser rishon to another Levi, so Levi number one doesn't have, right, he can't, all he has is he can be braygus. He can be upset. But he has no other recourse. The mashche mamone is legabe, but that's not true. If we're talking about a case where I literally gave him the meiser rishon, and then he deposited it back with me, then what? That's his money. I can't go ahead and give that to someone else. Ella lav shmamila b'delo not lu shmamila. Rather, what you have to say is that halacha l'maisa. It's not a case where he took it from me. And therefore, again, all we have is my verbal commitment. Hu gavra diyav azuze ashumshu. It's also another story. There was a guy who paid money for sesame seeds. Okay, so we'll say, so let's just call it like this. Ruven comes to me, and Ruven gave me money for sesame seeds. I'm selling sesame seeds, right? Ruven gives me money. Fine, what happened? L'sofi yakir shumshani hadrabahu. So what happens? Then sesame seeds go up. So I say to Ruven, Ruven, thank you. I'm sorry, but I want to renege on the transaction. So va'amr lehu, va'amru le, lesle shumshami, shakol zuzech. So I said to Ruven, you know what? I don't have any more sesame seeds. Take your money back. So lo shakol zuzeh. What happened? Ruven didn't pick up his money, and sure enough, what occurred? Ignov, the money was stolen from my house. Okay. So now what happened? So then when Ruven and I come before Rava, Amrle, Kevan da Amrle shakol zuzeh for lo shaklis, lo mi bay shomer sacha de lo havi ela afidu shomer chinam nami lo havi. So now watch this. So now we came before Rava, and Rava said, listen, when someone tells you, pick up your money from my house, and you don't do so, so the person who had the money he's not a shomer sachar, he's not even a shomer chidam, and therefore he has no responsibility for your money. And as well say, once you tell someone to take back their stuff and they fail to do so, I am freed from any responsibility vis-a-vis that money. Okay, that's the story. That's the story. We'll say, watch this, such a fascinating plot twist. Amrli Rabbanan l'Rava. Right? So the Rabbanan said to Rava, Vaha bai lekabuli alei mishe para. Amrlu achinami. So the rabbi said to Rava, 1 second, but Silber should get a mishe para. I should get a mishe para. Right after Rava said, I did make a verbal commitment to do something, and now I'm backing out of it. And Rava said, yeah, you're right. Silber gets a mishe para. Fine. So I'll say, Amr Papi, Amrli Ravino, Lididi, Amrli Hamir Rabbanan. So I'll say, listen to this. So as they were talking about this story, Rav Papi said, Ravina said to me that there was one of the rabbis, so Rabbanan, Rav Tavos Shmei, his name was Rav Tavos. Barmilei, Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra Shmei. Others say his name was Shmuel Bar Zutra. The Havi Yaivle Le Kol Chalala Da Alma, Lahava Kamashani V'Dibrei. And this guy, we'll just call him Rav Shmuel. Right? This guy Rav Shmuel was so trustworthy that even had you given him all the treasure in the world, he wouldn't lie. He was known as a man of integrity. And Rose say what happens? So as they're debating the story of Shmuel said, Bididi Hava Ovda. This is my story. Don't tell my story. This is my story. This happened to me. I'm the sesame guy. Right? This story happened to me. But I'm going to tell you, you guys have this, the story all wrong. The story all wrong. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what the story was. Here's what happened. Rosh Shmuel says, this guy, Ruvain, came to me. He came to me late on Erev Shabbos. And what happened? So V'kaya Bava, Amrli, Islachashum Shemila Zabuni. And this guy came, so now Rosh Shmuel is saying, let me tell you the story. This guy came to me, right, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain came to me late on Erev Shabbos, and Ruvain knocked on my door and he said, listen, you have any sesame seeds? Right now, right? I'm in the market for some sesame, right? Do you have any sesame seeds? We'll say, Amr Amrle, lo. And Rav Shmuel said to him, no, I do not have any sesame seeds. Amrle, lahavi harach zuzi biki bikaton gabach da chashchali. Then Reuven said to me, fine. So right, Reuven said to Rav Shmuel, you don't have any sesame seed, okay, can you do me a favor? It's already late on Friday. Can I leave my money in your house? Right, because it's getting close to Shabbos. Amrle, so Rav Shmuel says to the guy, ha beisa kamach. So Rav Shmuel said to the guy, my home is open to you. Home is open to you. And I will say, what does my home open to you mean? What does that mean? That means, look, you could do whatever you want, but I'm not taking any responsibility. So what happens? Sure enough, sure enough, what happened? So Reuven, the guy, placed the money in Rav Shmuel's home, and the money got stolen. So ultimately, they came before Rava. Amarle, kol ha beisa kamak lo mibai shomer sachar lo havi ella afilu shomer chinam nami lo havi. So I will say, so again, and they pass anytime you say to someone, listen, kind of like my house is open to you, that's a nice way of saying, look, you're more than happy to put your stuff down in my house, but I take no responsibility for it. So therefore, again, sure enough, Rav Shmuel was freed from any level of responsibility. So they said to Rav Shmuel, but that can't be the story. But in the story it says that they said to Rava, but this guy should get a mishapara, which I will say indicates that some transaction did occur. So I will say, what does Rav Shmuel respond? Va'amrli lo hayu dvarim me'olam. Rav Shmuel said to the Chevron in the base medrash, that never happened. That never happened. So I will say, so the story as it was being told was in fact a false narrative, and this whole idea that there was a partial transaction that occurred never occurred. I will say, tremendous Musa Haskell. Just because people say something does not mean that it's true. And just because people write something, post something, tweet something, meme something, gif something, right, doesn't mean that it's true. We live in such an age where if somebody says something, it takes on an air of authority. And especially if you see it, if you get it on WhatsApp and it says on top, forwarded many times, right, it must be MS. It must be MS. I will say, again, what is it? Trust but verify, right? Again, just because it's so important. And again, I will say, especially in news and especially with opinions, people have an incredible way of voicing opinions that sound incredibly authoritative, even though they may be totally false and unfounded. In life, a person really has to go ahead and do their due diligence before they put their complete trust into something. Incredible. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol Sha'kesef Yado Yad Al Yado. So we'll say, okay, so we have to, so again, open items so far. We have a lot going on over here, right? I just want to try to finish the Mishnah. Right? So we'll say, actually, let's finish it. All right, open items so far is we'll say, what's the power of a down payment? We still don't have clarification on that. Number two, which is the big thing, this whole mishapara. When do you get a mishapara? There's a distinction between a mishapara and michusare amana, right? The actual curse. And with the curse itself, is someone cursing you, right? Is this just an announcement? What is it exactly? Wherein lies the distinction between a mishapara and michusare amana, right? The distinction between ultimately, again, a mishapara versus lacking integrity. Those are all open items. We should know where kol shakes yado ala yaram. Shimon says, whoever has the money has the upper hand. Tanya Amr Shimon, Emasai. When is this so? Bisman shakes aperes biad mocher. This is when both the money and the merchandise is in the hand of the seller. But if the money is in the hands of the seller and the merchandise is in the hand of the purchaser, you can't go ahead and retract anymore because the money's in his hand. Biado, in his hand, it's not in his hand, it's not in the purchaser's hand. Biad mocharu, it's in the hands of the seller. So you just said, Ela mitnei shedemei kaspo biado. Rather, it means because the value of his money, i.e. the merchandise, is in the purchaser's hand. So pshita, that's obvious. Well, in other words, he'll say, if the merchandise is in the purchaser's hand and the money is in the seller's hand, he'll say, what do you call that? A finalized sale, right? So that was pshita. So Amarav Halaskina, what's the case? Interesting case over here. We'll say where the attic of the purchaser was ultimately again rented to the seller. So the Gemara says, why did Bosek was going back to what we saw before? Why did Chazal in general institute that Ma'os Einon Konos and you have to do Mashiach Matantlin? Because I have a concern that Allah might say if you give money, but yet again, the seller sells the merchandise. If something happens, the seller is not going to try to save the purchaser's merchandise. So we'll say in this case over here, essentially the property is in already the Rishus of the Lokeach. Enough with the leka ba'onis iu tarach u'maisile. In this case, I will say the seller is still because again of the rental agreement. So ultimately, again, the seller is going to save the merchandise of the purchaser. Ahu gavra, a story. Diyav zuze achamra. So I said there's ultimately again a story of a guy who went ahead and paid money, put down money for wine. In the end, he heard that the wine was going to be taken by the government. So the purchaser obviously said, give my money back. I don't want to buy wine anymore because the government's going to take my wine. So they came before Rav Chisda, and Chisda said, we'll say in the same way that Mashiach only affects the transaction for the seller, so too it only affects the transaction for the purchaser as well. And therefore, Allah said in this transaction, as long as the purchaser has not, even though he paid the money for the wine, if he has not done Mashiach, he has the ability to go ahead and get out of the transaction. So we'll stop over for today. A lot to do tomorrow, but it's a very short Amud Aleph. It will be great. And Amir Hashem, tomorrow we will close up all of our loose ends as well regarding, again, Mishapara, as well as the power of down payment. What did Daf Rabbi say? Shkoyach.